the screen up?
20 at the moment.
Yeah. 20, amazing. So once that starts to slow down, I'll say hello to everybody.
Yay, we got a chat.
Hey, we are now live on YouTube.
Awesome. We still growing, Neil?
Yeah, we are 21 concurrent viewers at the moment.
Perfect. Ah, and something's happened in the chat as well. Warren, amazing.
Hi.
David Pickles.
Hello, Scott. Oh.
Hello, Warren.
Warren's good.
Hello, David Pickles. Hello.
Hello, David Pickles.
Hello, Warren.
Can they all hear us now then?
Yeah, well, we're live on YouTube and we're live on Zoom.
All right, okay.
Perfect.
So, hi, John Foden.
Good morning,
Andy
Wilson
2000.
from Colorado.
Hi, Richard Pete. Hi, Anthony Palmer.
Andy 2000 and John Forden.
Hello, Wilson in the US of A.
Yeah.
Colorado, well.
Oh, shame there's no subtitle for the Scottish people.
We'll just speak really slowly for you.
Oh no, mate, I'm going to ramp it up so you can't understand a thing.
All I got there from that
You're
was
right, Wilson.
theme.
How's it going? This is going to be a fun ride for you, son.
Hello to Mark the Taylor Hankins, editor of Johnny Smith.
Colin Hennessy's just come online from Kames EV. Right. Well, shall we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We can get kicked off. Hello, everybody. My name's Charlie. I work for Octopus Electric Vehicles, and we have the sort of technical wizardry that has allowed this to happen. I'm going to introduce you all to who we've got with us today. My role at Octopus is to help community people that love EVs to help them do more with those. So if you guys have anything you want to do, please let me know. Nick and I have been to the Frankfurt Motor Show. I know Neil, I've come to a few of your events, things like that. So if there are things that you want to try and achieve with electric vehicles or to help people learn more about them, please let Neil know, let whoever know, and then you can put me in touch with me and we can get that sorted. We're going to talk today through the EV Nexus, which is sort of Neil's and everybody who has sort of grown this electric vehicle community in the UK. I think it's really exciting. I've not seen it anywhere else really properly around the world. I've been in Norway and seen like Tesla owners groups and whatnot, but this is really a come one, come all. It doesn't really matter. If you like EVs, you're good in our books. So I'll hand over to Neil and he can chat you through everything else. Thank you.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming along. This is our first virtual event, and I've got to say I'm flipping nervous, but it's going to be great fun. So yeah, a little bit of an introduction about the EV Groups Nexus. It was originally started in summer last year. It's for clubs by clubs. It was set up as an initiative to promote collaboration and cooperation between all different types of electric car clubs around Europe. So we have local, regional and national clubs all involved. We have a big community of club admins who all chat together And it's just a great way of sharing insights and sharing ideas. And we thought it would be a really great way to bring all of these clubs together for this virtual meetup. So thank you for all taking part. Just like to go through the panel today. So obviously, Charlie, you've just met. We have Heather. Heather, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Kennedy and I am the founder of the Scottish EV Drivers Club. I'm based in South West Scotland myself. I have been driving electric cars since about 4.5 years ago, and I set up the club then, so it's 4.5 years old. So yes, and we've got nearly 1,000 members now. So yeah, it's good to be part of the next EV Group Nexus as well. So.
Okay, John Brooks, otherwise known as Beardy McBeardface.
Hello, yeah, I'm John. I'm based in Kent and I run Kent EVs. We met Neil when he first sort of started Sussex EVs, and I had my arm firmly twisted all the way up my back to start a group in Kent. So we did, and it's slowly growing. We're also an active part of the EV Group Nexus chat group, which is all the group leaders that Neil spoke about, where we share information and ideas, and we do some planning for larger events, things like Fully Charged Live, etc. I've had a passion for electric vehicle for a number of years, but I only changed into an EV last September when the lease on my then current car came to an end. So yeah, really nice to meet you all, and hello to everybody that's joining us.
Now on to Nick Ramo.
Hello everyone. So a lot of you know me as EV Nick. I have a YouTube channel that does videos on Renault Zoes and various electric cars. But I also like to take more bites of cake than I can possibly stuff in my mouth. So I now started EV Lounge, but I'm a proud member of EV Nexus as I run Derbyshire EVs. So if anyone's in the Derbyshire area, feel free to come and join Derbyshire EVs. And I'd have to thank Neil for well, I think we all have to thank Neil for forcing us to start an EV club for our local areas and showing that there is a need for small local clubs.
Thank you, Nick. I just want to respond to one of the questions that's come through YouTube. Yes, there is a Hampshire EVs group. So you can just have a look for it on Facebook. Just search for Hampshire EVs and you'll be able to find it. You'll also, very remiss of me, you'll also, if you go to evgroups.co.uk, you will find a complete directory of all of the clubs which are involved, including Hampshire EVs and all the various others. Okay, and now, last but not least, our special guest today is Dr. Euan McTurk, who's here to talk to us about battery technology.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I am, well, Dr. Euan McTurk. I'm a battery electrochemist, currently working at a company called Advocacy in Edinburgh that's developed a next generation battery management system, which is completely different from anything in any EV at the moment. It has a raft of really big advantages over what's currently being used. In addition to that, I've been driving EVs for as long as I've been working on battery tech, and I've also got my own YouTube channel on battery tech and electric vehicles in general called Plug Life Television.
Thank you very much. Right, so we've got quite a few questions which have already come through. So who wants to kick us off? Charlie, I think you wanted to ask a question.
So yeah, so I think it's all really well and good that we all know who each other are, and I think us as panelists have met each other before and know, but I think it'd be really cool to learn a little bit more about our sort of electric vehicle passion. And I suppose if you could buy any electric vehicle, money no object, but you still have to do your practicalities or do the stuff that you want to do, what would it be and why? Just so we can get people chatting and understanding a little bit more about who we are and what we do. Neil, do you want to kick off with that?
Yes, why not? Yeah, so I first got involved in electric cars back in 2017, end of 2017, when my brother-in-law bought himself a Leaf 24, and he was very proud to, on a moderately low income, to have been able to afford a 3-year-old electric vehicle and use it daily. and he's made a really good show of it. So that was my very first experience of physically driving an electric car. So it was his Leaf, and I was, you know, it's always the cliche, isn't it? You get in it and the light comes on and it suddenly makes sense to you. So 3 months later, I bought a Leaf. We've still got it. I now drive an MG as well. And they're both great cars, both really, really good cars. So I rather foolhardy, yeah, I can't figure out what that word is, but you know which word I mean.
You meant you were right with full-heartedly.
Is that actually a word?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll go with that then.
We can let that be a debate on the chat.
So I rather foolhardily decided to start up an electric vehicle club, partly because I wanted to meet people. I wanted to meet people in my local area who were in a similar boat. I certainly didn't work with anybody. I didn't have any close friends who were driving electric vehicles. Both my sister had a Tesla at the time, but my brother still had his petrol car. He's now got a Roadster. And so what occurred to me was, if you're at the cutting edge of a technology, if you're the first person that in your friend group or in your family who's dipped their toes into a technology, it can be quite nerve-wracking. It can be quite a lonely experience. And so having these small communities, these local communities, to me was really important. It's a way of encouraging people, and that was why I did that. And through that, I've met some great people, like all of the panelists here today. John Brooks was one of the first ones that I met. Started Ken TVs, also the Plug Seeker runs Surrey, and from that we have helped spawn more than 20 different regional clubs. So it's been fantastic. Someone else now.
Amazing. Heather, do you want to talk a little bit about the startup of the Scottish EV Drivers Club?
I started off, it was 2015, and my car that I had basically died on me, and I thought, I'm going to go and get a new car. So I went and tried out different ones, and I actually ended up getting the Renault Zoe because it was the cheapest option for a small car at the time. Never learned anything about EVs at the time. I just dove in and just got it. So everybody in my family thought I was nuts. So did my friends. And then I think it was just absolutely amazing. From there, my brother ended up getting one. I had it for 2 years, and then I changed to a Nissan Leaf, and then my brother ended up changing to one of them as well. So basically, I started the club up when I got my electric car, because at the time I didn't know how to work out what to do with it or anything, and I think there was quite a lot of people in the same boat. So basically I started the club. Somebody showed me how to work the car because the garage didn't have a clue. So from there it's just grew and grew, and now we help out a lot of people who are looking to buy them new cars. We talk at Home Energy Scotland events and things, and from really the amount of people I've met through creating this club it's amazing how many lovely people I've met who are just as passionate about them as myself. So yeah, it's been a great journey, so it has. But, yeah, so that's really how it came about. So it has.
Amazing. I think that's a huge thing, right? I think that's going to be a recurring theme through everything that we talk about today, is actually how the knowledge base of the people that are helping you get into the cars a lot of the time isn't, or traditional ways of buying cars, of maybe their knowledge base isn't the greatest. And I think that's what you guys do so well, is helping people understand just what's it actually like. That's right. And I think like John came to one of our events and he did the exact same thing, and that was amazing, having people there to be able to just make sure that everything we were saying was absolutely the truth. And John, I don't know if do you want to talk about how you set up Ken? It sounds like Neil made you rather than anything else.
I had a big hammer.
Yes. Well, my start with EVs was I love the Gadget Show, and I was watching an episode of the Gadget Show, and Craig had Robert Llewellyn on, and Robert was talking, and they mentioned fully charged, and I thought, well, I've never heard of this. So I then went and investigated fully charged and started following the YouTube channel, and thought, actually, I really enjoy this. And actually, the more of the episodes I watched, the more interested I had in electric cars, and my interest grew and grew and grew to where I am now, where I can bore for Europe talking about electric cars. And if anybody challenges me, I've normally got an answer to every question. And obviously I was on Twitter anyway because of my business before I became disabled. And then my Twitter groups or friends started to grow, and I got more and more EV enthusiasts as part of my Twitter group of friends, as it were. And one of those was Neil. And I think we were talking at Fully Charged Live. We'd met for the first time at the first Fully Charged Live. And Neil sort of said, well, you know, you really ought to start a group in Kent. You're in the next door county, so I can support you. And I thought, well, why not? I'm sitting around at home most of the time, not doing anything. So starting an EV group where most of the work is done through social media, it wasn't actually a problem for me. And it's just grown from there. And as you said, you know, we've now started to do events that are either EV connected or actually away from the EV community, like Fates or standard car shows, where we can go along, pop up the gazebo, have a couple of cars on display, and like you said, Charlie, we can actually talk to people about what it's really like to own an EV and what it's actually like to live with that as, you know, your everyday vehicle.
Yeah, it's about sharing your everyday lived experience.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That brings realism to people.
Absolutely. I also think a lot of people that are new to electric vehicles know what they want, but they don't actually know what they need, right? And that's where they speak to people like yourselves, and all of a sudden start to work out from that what they actually do need from their car, or not what they need from their car, but what car matches their needs. Does that make sense? And I think as well, I met Nick. I'd met Nick a couple of times, but we met sort of to link it nicely to John's answer. We met properly for the first time at that car show that I just thought I'd turn up to randomly, and then Nick managed to sneak me in and get me all sorted. Nick, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, you can do. So it was. I said to Neil, the one most important thing I want to do as a local EV group is gate crash petrol head meetings as much as I can with EVs and confuse the hell out of them when they where's the engine? What do you mean there's no engine? So I went to a local one in, well, it's not local to me, but localish to me. It's in Rotherham, Sheffield, and the premise, it's a big, massive park thing they have every year. They have loads of petrol cars all there, revving their engines, showing off how clean the actual car is physically. But we thought we'd turn up with a load of dirty EVs and show how clean they were in, air quality wise, and how the technology is going to go. And you got a lot of resistance there, but we also got quite a lot of just very inquisitive people wanting to learn more. And even the people who were very negative EVs at the start, once they realised that me and Charlie were watching the F1 Grand Prix on our phones, and that we weren't just massive EV heads, we're actual petrol heads as well. Their interest starts to come round.
I think there's a lot of that within the EV community as well. There's a lot of people, myself included, that were big petrol heads that have been converted and now see the benefits of EVs and actually think, I mean, I've been really lucky in my life. I've driven all sorts of normal petrol cars, and I'm talking from minis all the way through to sort of Maseratis and Ferraris and, Bentleys and Rolls Royces. But I don't think I've ever found a car within the petrol community that matches the performance of, say, the original P100D Tesla. And I think that's what's gripped me, is that I can get all the fun and all the enjoyment out of an electric car that I used to get out of a petrol car. And the noise factor and the vibration for me isn't a big part of it. It's the actual driving of the car.
Well, this is a neat one. Lead me on to Charlie's question, which is, which EV would you have? And I'd have the. All of you are now going to go on your phone and Google this car, the Aspark Owl. Oh, look at Neil! Look at Neil. Neil, I don't know if everyone can see Neil's camera, but Neil literally looked straight down and started googling the Aspark Owl.
Oh, now that's rather tasty.
It is, isn't it? If money is no object, that is the car I want. That is a petrol KED car, and it's, if anyone on the chat wants to Google it, it's ASPARKOWL, and it starts at £3.2 million.
Much more realistically, RS Finks has just said that Polestar 2 for the win. I can't complain with that. That's.
I want to know what Euan's money no object car is.
Well, you know what? I've owned 4 EVs in my time, and all of them I can genuinely say were cars that I really wanted to own. I'm very lucky at such a young age to have owned my dream cars. So the reason I got into EVs at the first place because when I was a student at the University of Dundee, I was doing an applied physics degree called renewable energy. And I was coming to the end of my 3rd year, going into my honours year, looking for a project to do. I was looking for inspiration. And one day, the person who would become my project supervisor turned up in a newly acquired 1999 Peugeot 106 electric, which is a very rare machine in the UK. Peugeot and Citroën made about 10,000 nickel cadmium powered electric vehicles between the mid-90s and the mid-2000s. A handful of them made it across to the UK. Most of them were repatriated, but a few of them slipped the net. And I ended up getting behind the wheel of this, doing my honours project on it. It basically launched my career path into batteries and EVs. And the 106 was a fantastic machine because it was incredibly dependable, despite the fact that the batteries were, by that point, a decade old. They were down to 30 miles of range from 50 originally. And, they did require more maintenance than lithium ion because it was a so-called flooded NiCad cell, which meant you needed to top it up with deionized water every now and again. Thankfully, we had the equipment to do that. But it was far more dependable than the typical petrol or diesel cars that students tend to run. My own car at the time was a Renault Clio Mark II, which thought it was an electric car because so many times I would come out and find that it had drained its auxiliary battery and wouldn't start. So that was incredibly annoying. That was replaced with a hand-me-down diesel Renault Scenic, which tried to find all sorts of innovative ways to kill itself, culminating in a noise that got louder and louder and louder until it went very quiet, and then every single light came on in the dashboard. It lit up like a Christmas tree and everything died. So it actually ended up breaking down on the motorway on the way to selling it. So this electric car that I was using through the university for a project was just a revelation in terms of how smooth and how reliable it was. It was the oldest car I'd got behind the wheel of at the time, but it was just so robust. In fact, its auxiliary battery died in the middle of a brutally cold winter, and I drove it around for a fortnight before I could be bothered replacing it because the DC to DC converter, as soon as you put your key in, well, not the ignition, but you know what I mean. As soon as you put the key in, the DC to DC converter took power from the traction battery and ran the 12-volt system. So the only thing I lost was remote central locking. As soon as you manually unlock the car, put the key in, it would start fine. So that car is now on display in Dundee Museum of Transport, and it's my intention to upgrade it to cutting-edge battery tech at some point. That was then, I ended up buying it when I left the university. I actually, at one point, owned 2 of them and then decided that was a bit silly. The other car that I had was a 24 kilowatt-hour Nissan Leaf called Busby, which people who've seen Plug Live Television will have seen on our road trip to Skye from Edinburgh, which is a good 250 miles. It's, considerably longer than the range of the Leaf. Skye is an incredibly remote island. There is some charging infrastructure, but as we discovered, it was actually growing quite rapidly. And in fact, I believe Mike, who's on the attendees today, not only lives on Skye but works at Talisker Distillery. So only slightly jealous of you, Mike. But yeah, that was an amazing experience in just about the shortest range electric car that money can buy. And the Charge Place Scotland network is just so well developed. And there are so many sites, particularly in the central belt, that have multiple rapid chargers. We're starting to see more and more charging hubs and things. So that Leaf was easily doing 12,000 miles a year. But Busby has now been replaced with Professor Lord Busbington II, which is a second-hand Tesla Model S. I got lucky, bought it at auction, and I bought it blind. I knew I was taking a risk, but I bought it through Jonathan Porterfield from EcoCars, who's based on Orkney but delivers anywhere in the UK, and he knows a good EV when he sees one. So I trusted him. I'd bought my Leaf through him. About half a dozen of my friends and family had bought EVs through him as well. And lo and behold, when this Model S turns up, not only did it have a better color of interior than I thought it would have had. Being colorblind, I hadn't realized that it wasn't cream. It was like the light gray, which was a limited edition thing, and it looks quite nice. It also had the dual onboard chargers, which means that it can suck up electrons at 22 kilowatts off of a destination charge point, which is something that really only the Renault Zoe can do. Other than that,
You don't plug it in twice. When I was at Tesla, that was the question I always got asked: do I plug it? Do I plug it on both sides? And it's like, no, you only have to plug it in once.
That's incredible. It's amazing that people think that, isn't it? But no, I mean, it's just so handy. So like, an 85 kilowatt hour battery versus the 24 kilowatt hour in my Leaf. And if I drive them both to the same destination charge point, twin-headed charge point, they will charge from empty to full in the exact same time, because the onboard charger is that more powerful. But this is where a second-hand Model S actually makes a lot of sense. So if you're going to really remote locations where the charging infrastructure can be a bit patchy, for example, if you're going to be relying on some of the more remote Ecotricity electric highway rapid chargers that don't even have CCS fitted and so on, the Model S has the CHAdeMO adapter, which is really useful for those. Obviously, the supercharger network continues to grow, so that's two forms of rapid charging. And then on top of that, they've just released the CCS adapter for the Model S as well. So that is now, and obviously if you have the dual onboard chargers, technically that's rapid charging at 22 kilowatt. So my car can rapid charge using 4 different formats. It's a veritable Swiss Army knife. So that is really handy for road trips to the most remote parts of the country. Not only that, but the most remote parts of Europe. Because that such as the supercharging network, I could drive that anywhere on mainland Europe as well quite happily. So that is a car that I fully intend to run into the ground. It had 90,000 miles on the clock when I bought it. It would have had considerably more by this point if it weren't for the lockdown, obviously with the COVID pandemic. But hopefully when this is all over, there'll be a few road trips to go exploring all sorts of fun places. So yeah, I mean, I'd obviously been admiring what Tesla had been doing from a battery perspective and an EV perspective for many, many years. And it was quite fitting that exactly a decade after I first got behind the wheel of an electric car, the little 106 electric, I took delivery of the Model S, as I say, just a decade on. So I've been very lucky to own my dream EVs and still own them as well.
See, my dream EV goes back in time in terms of what I would want as a dream EV is actually a converted old classic. And that would be a 1969 Series 2 Land Rover converted to electric with about 200 miles of range with a decent onboard charger, and I will be happy as Larry with that. I have a real passion for Land Rovers. Series 2 Land Rover was the first car I ever drove at the age of 14, off-road, I'd like to add. And I've been in love with them ever since. All the quirks and stuff, and I've been lucky enough to own a couple. But yeah, Series 2A, 1969, so it's the same age as me, restored and then converted for electric.
Amazing.
Nice.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, electric classic cars, Electron Garage, Indra. Oh, there's a few. Zero EV. They're all doing amazing things with retrofits, and that's definitely the greenest EV you can buy, because you've reused a chassis, which typically saves up to 10 tons of CO2, and you're keeping an iconic vehicle on the road, but you've made it far greener than it will ever be. That would have ever been as a petrol or diesel format of vehicle. That said, a second-hand EV is also a green option to go for because it was already built.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I quite often go up to London electric cars, and I've actually been lucky enough to go out in a converted 1969 Land Rover that they've just done, and as well as going out in a classic Mini.
Oh, nice.
I've never been in a Mini that's gone so fast in my life, which was quite interesting because it was just towards the beginning of the pandemic over here at the beginning of the year. And even then, the roads around central London were starting to get quiet. So we were lucky enough to be able to scream around central London in a converted Mini and a converted Land Rover.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Fantastic. So Gary has pointed something out very, very helpfully for us. So all of those that are participating or are in the Zoom webinar, you should have a Q&A panel. You can start typing your questions in there and you should be able to upvote them. So you should be able to choose backwards and forwards what's going on there. And if you are on YouTube, you should be able to ask a question there and we should be able to see that in the comments. So just so you've got an idea of, maybe I can't see the chat at the moment, but if you're chatting, do let us know questions in there. That would be brilliant. Now,
is that the lovely Gary Cambridge?
Yes.
Did he bring cake?
Oh.
Talking of questions, there's an excellent question here which has come in from, it's just gone off the top of my screen. From Roger Bradley. It says, one thing I would like is the ability to upload my own sounds to the vehicle engine sound.
Now that would be brilliant.
If you could have any sound, what would it be?
Well, I've already thought about this.
Millennium Falcon.
No. What I would actually like is the sound from Ivor the engine. So
brilliant.
As we're going along, my car's going psh-tickoof, 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 psh-tickoof.
So I have an answer to this as well. I was in my time at Tesla, I got to do a lot of really cool stuff for them, and one of the things I did was race at Goodwood Festival of Speed. And right next door, we had the new the new Range Rover SVR. So it was a V8 supercharged thing. It made quite a nice noise when it was going quite quickly. But the Land Rover made this point of every single time, because they were parked next to us, when they turned it on, they would rev it as loud as it could from cold, popping and banging right next to our Model S. And there was a racing driver I knew really quite well called Euan McTurk. And he jumped in the car with me, my Model S, and we started driving down towards the start grid. And he said, can we do something very quickly? And I was like, yeah. So he connected his phone to Bluetooth and he played the Saturn rocket launch as we rolled through the paddock at full blast with all the windows down. And everybody, including McLaren engineers from the Formula One team, had their heads poking around corners going, what on earth is that coming down the road? Yeah, so I think that's what I would want. I'd want the Saturn rocket launch to be able to be played as I drove down the road.
I think the other one that would be quite cool, I don't know if you've ever seen that video that was going around of, you can hear, it sounds like a Formula One car coming around the street, and it's actually a bloke on the back of a push bike, and the bloke behind him is playing a trombone, and he's playing a noise of a Formula One car through a trombone.
That one's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, though, that you just know that some idiots are going to ruin it for everyone else by having the most annoying noises for the engine simulation. I really liked my 106 because it predated any pedestrian warning, requirements. So it was genuinely silent. It was, only the noise of the electric motor itself. And there was one day when I was, I did a little weekend job at B&Q, and my mates and I, we had finished our shift. We were locking up the building, and one of my other mates is sitting on his push bike, texting away, just waiting on the manager locking up. Meanwhile, I'm rolling towards him in the 106, like proper, Peter Griffin style, just kind of moving up. Got to within like a meter of him and then just blasted the horn, and he properly cacked himself because he just didn't realize I was there. Which then again does highlight the pedestrian safety issue. But to be honest, tire noise when you're actually within a proper urban environment and the need to look where you're going and so on, I think that there's a risk that if we go too heavily towards pedestrian warning noises, that we're going to ruin one of the advantages of EVs, which is quieter urban areas, which will be more pleasant environments. So there needs to be a happy medium there, I think.
A couple of answers that have come into the car thing on the Q&A here. Warren from Sussex says he would quite like the Jaws theme, and Ben Wood said he'd quite like the noise from the Knight Rider on his car.
Oh, no, Neil Williams has said the best, the Monty Python coconut horse riding.
Oh, that, yes.
Which me and Dean Fielding actually did in a Tesla Roadster.
I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. That was Dean's idea, but my idea to throw him in the boot.
Got a question here for Euan from Colin Hennessy. Euan, do you think battery charging has a wireless future? And if so, why haven't Tesla developed it?
That's a good question. Inductive charging is something that we've been looking at for decades now, probably within different environments. I mean, we've already got inductive charging for mobile phones, for example. And actually the GM EV1 technically had inductive charging. It's just that it wasn't like a case of park over the induction pad. It was a case of slot the induction pad into the front. The MagnaCharge format was an inductive format. There was no physical contact. It was just slide in, slide out. And that was meant to make it perceived by the public that EVs are even safer because there's no way you can zap yourself. So the MagnaCharge format worked really well, but the only reason it worked really well is because it was fitting into such a tight slot. There was no way you could misalign it. When you have a ground pad that an electric vehicle parks over to try and do the inductive charging, if you are off just by a tiny bit, you ruin the efficiency of the charging. There's massive efficiency losses. Autonomous driving or certain autonomous capabilities are probably going to resolve that to an extent, because you'll have self-parking vehicles that can line themselves up perfectly. And then if you have a certain amount of freedom of movement of the vehicle's induction pad underneath the vehicle to move itself horizontally, lengthways and breadthways to try and line up with the ground pad, then you can maximize the efficiency that way. That said, do we really need it? To be honest, I think that the cable solution that we have at the moment seems to work really well. The one situation where inductive charging would make more sense is on taxi ranks, so that you can just move up one space, start charging there, move up one space, start charging there. Although the way I see it, as cities transition to all electric taxi fleets, is you could have a similar thing to the checkouts in TK Maxx or at the post office, where they're all numbered, and then there's an intelligent system that knows which taxis got the fullest charge or which one's been there the longest. And then if someone comes along, they'll say, go to taxi number 4, go to taxi number 7, go to taxi number 2. So you're not necessarily going in the chronological order of the taxi rank, but you're going in the chronological order of which taxi's most ready to take you on, or which one deserves to take you on because they've been waiting the longest. There's ways and means about it. We could see inductive charging for some niche applications, but I think, to be honest, it's mainly going to be a wired setup, especially with rapid charging and so on as well.
Have you seen the one there is actually one that, funny enough, EV Lounge, we're going to discuss it with Martin and Craig on Sunday, because we're doing a VTG special, and there is actually a wireless bi-directional charger. A company called Oak Ridge have been testing it on delivery vans and stuff. So it'll be a mains buffer as well as so the idea is when it's obviously not being used as a delivery truck, it's parked up overnight, it's being a mains buffer at the same time.
Excellent. I mean, vehicle to grid is an essential way for things to go as well. CHAdeMO already supports that. CCS not so much coming soon, that sort of thing. Although I have heard that Mark 1 Renault Zoes, which have Type 2 charging only, were used in a vehicle to grid trial quite recently. So
yeah,
I don't know.
They were using vehicle-to-grid with AC, but this one I'm talking about is actually inductive. It's wireless V2G charging.
Oh yeah, totally get that. Yeah, I mean that is cool. Vehicle to grid is, as I said, that is of more interest to me, I would say, than in the inductive charging method. But that said, the fact that they've worked V2G into an inductive format is intriguing. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. The other thing as well is that we would need to very quickly standardize the inductive charging format. It's bad enough that we've had a format war between CHAdeMO and CCS. CCS has also had a bit of a format war with Type 1 and Type 2. So you use Type 1 with CCS in the States, you use Type 2 with CCS in Europe. Type 2 has created a different format war of itself over in Europe, which has caused issues with plug-in hybrids being fitted with Type 2, which means that they can plug into rapid chargers. And the reason that rapid chargers have Type 2 on them is because of the Renault Zoe, which didn't use CHAdeMO or CCS. And it just gets really confusing and annoying and self-defeating. So yeah, we absolutely need to standardize the format of the ground pad and the induction pad, so that we don't end up with competing formats or reduced efficiency if a particular vehicle with one size of induction pad parks over a ground pad with a different size, that sort of thing.
And I think the really scary thing for me, Euan, is that we're almost there. We're if you go back 3-4 years with charging, we were at that point with cables, right? And we're now almost out of those woods, and then to start that all back up again could be really, really, really horrible.
Very true.
So if memory serves me, in the first 2 seasons of Formula E, the safety car, the BMW i8, inductively charged. So when it was sitting in the paddock, it was over a pad, so that it was always topped up, ready to go.
Yeah,
and Simon Telford in the chat has just said that apparently there is a trial of wireless charging for taxis about to start in Nottingham.
Yep.
So there is a trial coming up for that quite soon. I imagine it'll start after the lockdown rather than now.
Yeah, I mean, that Nottingham trial, it's going to be an interesting one to watch, particularly how easily can the induction pads be retrofitted to existing vehicles? How is the efficiency affected by taxi drivers not being bothered enough to line up perfectly, that sort of idea? If it's a success and it's really high efficiency, or they manage to get drivers to park the vehicles perfectly, or if the induction pad itself can move to align perfectly, that sort of idea, then it will definitely gather traction. But I think that it will be pivotal in whether inductive charging really takes off, at least in the UK.
I think the other thing that I've seen a couple of videos of is a robot arm that they've had for some Teslas. So the Tesla parks in the garage and the cable's on a robot arm. You get out of the car and the arm finds the hole and plugs it in for you. Yeah,
there is something quite sordid looking about that video with the kind of, yes, it's kind of freaky looking, but
yeah.
You go Google Elon's comments on that as well. They're not most PC.
Mind you, with some of Elon's recent comments, I wonder whether he's going a bit stir crazy, locked up in his huge mansion, but who knows?
Yeah.
Oh, you would, wouldn't you? Actually, this sorry, Heather wants to ask a question in a moment, but before we get to that, just one quick point I wanted to make. Warren and I from Sussex EVs were at an event in Eastbourne at the beginning of the year, and one of the biggest questions, seaside town, all terraced houses, one of the biggest question we were asked is, how will I charge it? How will I plug it in? In my mind, capacitive charging pads along streets would make sense for domestic charging. Would you think that having street furniture, so poles with charging slots, would be more sensible or cheaper? Which would be cheaper and which would make more sense?
one would argue that the street furniture option's probably cheaper than digging up the full road itself. That said, you know, if you look at countries that are more advanced on EV uptake than the UK, for example, Norway. In fact, Plug Live Television has an episode about this called Norway's EV Success Story. When we were in Oslo, we saw a very similar setup to what you just described there, although what you're dealing with there is apartments, so even greater density of housing. Norway's EV uptake, like new car sales, 60% of them are electric now or something like that. I very quickly gave up counting the number of L bills that I saw when I was there. They are all over the show. They love them. What was typically the case in Oslo was that you would have a couple of type 2 charge points per street. And it all just seemed to work. Everyone seemed to have, like, you know, there was no worry about where you were going to plug in or when you were going to plug in. Everyone seemed to be able to, you know, to cope perfectly fine. In fact, the thing that interested me was the most modern, the most state-of-the-art charge points they had, because they've got a lot of legacy ones that use the Schuko, you know, the equivalent of a mains socket stuff from back in the day. It was in the 2000s that they'd installed these. They've still got a lot of the legacy stuff, but the latest type 2 charge points, quite often you would find it would be PHEVs that were sitting on them, you know, sucking electrons at the slowest rate because of their small onboard chargers for the lowest EV range, which seems like a bit of a douche move, but there we go. And yeah, despite that, the pure EVs were not struggling at all. Then on the opposite side of the country, Bergen, they had a different approach. They had a gigantic rapid charging hub. And that was similar to what we have in the likes of Dundee, but 2 or 3 times the size. And that was absolutely mobbed the first time we went past it. So yeah, if you have the dedicated space to make a charging hub and a progressive enough sense, you know, forward-thinking enough local authority, like Dundee, like Falkirk, like East Ayrshire, then yeah, they'll build the charging hubs. That said, if you have that space and there's a private network that wants to do it, like the Polar Charging Hub in Milton Keynes, you can easily do that as well with private investment. With the UK seaside towns, or with you know, sort of terraced house streets and so on, we've already got local authorities looking at this. Oxford has been leading the way on street charging trials. They've tried, for example, pop-up charge points, which seem to work really well, so that it's not street furniture until it's actually being used, and then the bollard pops up. And it's so close to the side of the road that, to be fair, if you were going to be using that tiny bit of pavement, you were probably going to end up scratching the car anyway. So, you know, it's conveniently sort of shoving you over a little bit. Then they've got, for example, cable gullies, so that if you live in a terraced house, you can have a conventional wall box fitted outside your house, run the cable under the pavement. There's like a little shuttered metal thing that goes flush with the pavement, and then it pops up and you can charge your car. They've got about 6 different techniques they've used, and Oxford have really led the way on street charging trials. So there's loads of different ways and means about it. Inductive charging could be one of them, but to be honest, there are cheaper and arguably more ingenious solutions out there as well.
Thank you. Heather, you wanted to ask something.
Yeah, Ben Woods asked a question, Euan. What do you think will be the biggest advancement in batteries in the next 5 years?
That's a good one. I have been pleasantly surprised at how much conventional lithium-ion chemistry has been ploughing on. So we've generally seen increases in energy density of at least 10% per year, which means that, you know, the range has more than doubled within the last decade. I think one of the most telling examples of this is that the BMW i3's range has doubled within the space of 6 years. And that's using the exact same physical battery size. So people who say, oh, the batteries are going nowhere, nonsense, they really are. To the extent the i3 is no longer offered, certainly in the UK, with a range extender, because it's just not deemed worth it by BMW. So conventional lithium ion, we're going to keep subtly tweaking that chemistry, probably more at the anode side, the negative electrode. We're going to start gradually increasing the content of silicon rather than graphite. The issue with silicon is that even although it is by far a more energy dense way to create a lithium ion battery than graphite. Graphite, you need 6 carbon atoms to house 1 lithium ion, and that is bulky, very bulky, but is needed for safety purposes. With silicon, the problem is that expands and contracts up to 25 times its original size during cycling, which physically breaks the cell apart. So there have been some big improvements coming through the labs, including one which I describe as a graphite or graphene corset around the silicon particles, which holds it in place as it's trying to expand and stops it expanding as much. And that means that the lifespan of that battery is greatly improved, as is its energy density. So we're going to see a lot more silicon in the short term, and that's going to result in big improvements in range. The Maxwell, bought by Tesla, dry electrode coating technique, you've reduced the amount of binder that's used, you've reduced production costs and so on as well. So we're going to have increased range and reduced costs and probably greater mechanical robustness of the chemistry itself. It's not going to break apart quite as easily. So that's going to be an exciting one to watch. Tesla have arguably got a lead on battery tech on that one. Plus, on the sticking with Tesla's battery tech breakthroughs, Jeff Dan's research group over in Canada, which is employed by Tesla to do battery research, recently discovered that the cobalt in nickel cobalt aluminium oxide cathodes, which is used by the Tesla Model S, X, and 3, certainly US built ones, they discovered that the cobalt that we'd previously thought, as electrochemists, we'd previously thought we needed that for thermal stability. Otherwise, the cell would fall apart at high temperatures. Turns out it's actually just been in there for the ride the whole time. So if you replace it with something like manganese or something that's cheaper and more abundant and more ethical, then you actually improve the performance and reduce the costs. So there's even bigger improvements happening there. Solid states is going to be a difficult one to crack, not least because even although it means you could switch to using you could arguably switch to using a pure lithium anode, and that means you've not got any silicon, you've not got any carbon. The lithium is what you actually want because that's what's taking part in the reaction. So you've vastly improved the energy density. The issue is that the dendrites, so the little branch-like growth of lithium when it plates back onto the negative electrode, that in a conventional lithium-ion cell, if you get dendrites by abusing the cell, or if you stupidly build one with a solid lithium anode, that will eventually puncture the separator and reach the positive electrode and create an internal short circuit where electrons can flow without taking the external circuit, and that's when you get an internal short circuit. With solid state electrolytes that we've been experimenting with, we previously thought that they were dendrite proof. It turns out they're more dendrite resistant. So there's still a bit of work to do, but Toyota and I believe also Dyson, despite having shelved their EV project, Dyson are still working on multiple solid state battery developments. And yeah, with so many big industries on there and companies that have been set up exclusively making early stage solid state lithium ion cells, I reckon that solid state will eventually come, but initially, like if we're talking within the next 5 years, silicon anodes and dry electrode coating, those are the big ones, I reckon.
We've got Tesla Battery Day next month as well, don't we?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to see what happens. It could be that they're maybe not quite ready to announce the production of the dry electrode coating technique. It may be that they're not quite ready to reduce the cobalt content even further in their electrodes, although they've already reduced it quite considerably. Although it is interesting to point out that the standard range Model 3 that's being built in China has now gone cobalt free by using one of the least energy dense chemistries of lithium ion, but also one of the safest and most ethical, lithium iron phosphate, typically used in electric buses. But it turns out that such as the floor pan, such as the battery space of the Model 3, that the standard range version, there was actually loads of spare space to put any less energy dense chemistry. And there's a company called CATL who cut their teeth on lithium iron phosphate and are one of the biggest battery manufacturers in the world. And this Chinese firm has created a very energy dense way of packing lithium iron phosphate to the extent that Tesla said, you know what, that's enough for our Model 3. That is an exciting development, and I would quite like the option to buy that in the UK or anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
The question here from Anthony Palmer. So Bristol First Bus are trialling biogas buses. Electric buses are being trialled in other cities. Is there any advantage over electric buses that you're aware of?
That's a good question. On a similar note, I remember back in the day, and Heather will know this because she's from around that neck of the woods as well, Stagecoach did a trial with buses that were running used chip fat. Now, East Ayrshire is unique in its ability to power an entire bus service on the amount of used chip fat that we can generate. We do love our fried food. As someone who's East Ayrshire born and raised, I'm allowed to say that. Yeah, there are issues with biogas though as well. I mean, okay, gas is technically slightly cleaner burning, but it is still, yeah, exactly. It's still burning fossil fuels. It's still creating CO2. And, you know, where is that bio coming from? Where is it derived from? I mean, if it's like a byproduct of anaerobic digestion or something like that, then who knows? But then again, you know, you're still burning it. So therefore, you've still got the mechanical unreliability of an internal combustion engine versus an electric vehicle, which is far more robust, far more reliable. With biogas, you know, it's as I said, there's still fundamentally nasties that are going to come out of it. I'm not too sure what the burning temperature is, but it could well be one that would burn through the components of an internal combustion engine quicker than petrol or diesel, for example. There's an issue with certain novel fuels like that, that, you know, the higher burning temperature can increase the wear on the components. First have been laggards on taking on new tech, which is incredibly disappointing. And unfortunately, I think they're barking up the wrong tree with the biogas. I would have just gone with electric, and, you know, I mean, China's done it. China's converted almost all of their bus fleet to full electric by this point, I believe. And the fact that you can do that with lithium iron phosphate tech, which is cheap, which is abundant, which is arguably more ethical, cobalt free, incredibly difficult to get it to blow up. And trust me, I've tried. Why would you not go down the electric route? It'll save you a ton of money as well. But hey,
I would have to completely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
A question here from the Dublin EV Owners Club. What is the current or future battery technology that excites you the most?
I've arguably just covered it. I mean, the silicon and the dry electrode coating tech, those are realistic. They're on the horizon, and there is the very real possibility that those will be in actual EVs you can buy within the next couple of years. Jeff Dan's breakthrough with the cobalt-free NCA tech as well, that was brilliant because we'd purely been taking it for granted that we needed cobalt there. Turns out we didn't. But then again, CATL's so-called cell-to-pack packaging technique for lithium iron phosphate, the fact that you've taken the least energy-dense cell chemistry and actually made it competitive, that's exciting. I mean, in terms of more kind of far out there options, actually one that's not that far out there because it's, again, very much in development. Other ones to keep an eye on, sodium ion. That's one that's being developed in Scotland, actually, up in Thurso by a company called AGM. So Renault are taking an interest in sodium ion. It's less energy dense than lithium ion because sodium's larger than lithium. But that said, it has a number of advantages, not least being cheaper, arguably more sustainable materials with a lot of the chemistries, and also it can be safely and reversibly discharged to 0 volts. With most lithium ion cells, you can only discharge them to about 2.7, 2.5 volts. And then after that, it becomes dangerous to recharge them because you've caused irreversible changes to the chemistry. Whereas with sodium ion, you could put a resistor across it, you could short the thing out, take it down to 0 volts, ship it halfway around the world without having to worry about shipping protocols, like massive containers to stop the thing from, if there's any battery fires or what have you, from sinking the entire ship. It would be so much safer and cheaper to transport. Yes, you would take a hit on range, but a lot of the improvements that we've made with lithium ion battery chemistry can potentially be transferred across to sodium ion as well. So I think that's going to have a big impact on electromobility and energy storage as well. Lithium sulfur is another one that's been in development for many, many years. Oxis in Oxford have made some big strides on this, but again, whenever you ask them, if you can get a prototype cell to play with, they never reply, which is a shame. But they are now building a factory in Brazil that's making lithium sulfur cells. So lithium sulfur, the volumetric energy density is similar to what you have with lithium ion. So in other words, not a great increase in range from being able to cram more cells in, but the gravimetric energy density is much higher, which means it's really light. So that means you get an increased range through a lighter vehicle. And it's also a more ethical chemistry, a more sustainable chemistry, more abundant materials. It's sulfur. But on top of that as well, that's going to be a huge thing for aerospace because it's so light. Potentially lithium sulfur is going to really kickstart electric flight. And that's a huge, massive decarbonization target that we will achieve if we do manage to iron out those final little niggles that are stopping lithium sulfur from being commercialized yet, not least the so-called polysulfide shuttle phenomenon, which is self-discharging. But we've made big strides towards resolving these, and fingers crossed within the next 5-10 years, we'll start to see those coming onto the market.
And there's a question that's just been asked in the Zoom chat, and someone's asked if you've seen any hybrid battery designs, as in battery plus capacitor, rather than hybrid. But have you seen any battery plus capacitor? And I'm just wondering what are the actual differences between battery and a capacitor? What are the advantages between the two?
Yeah. So in terms of hybrid designs between the two, I have heard of some. Some I can talk about and some I can't. But it's all very early days with these. One of the latest, Goodenough, John Goodenough, who's the godfather of the lithium-ion battery, one of his latest works with Professor Braga, who was leading. It was Professor Braga who was leading the project, but I believe that was a solid-state battery / somewhat supercapacitor hybrid, if I recall correctly. But that was very, very early days. They actually claimed that it could somehow self-charge as well. But to be honest, it was such a very, very early stage of the work. It was still fundamental electrochemistry. It was cycled at an infinitesimally small current or C rate. So it was nowhere near ready for the automotive sector. But that was an interesting one. So yeah, there are some, some of the research groups out there that are looking into hybrids of these, but supercapacitors are already being touted as being used in a hybrid system with battery tech for high performance supercars and so on, because supercapacitors may only have about 1/10 to 1/20 of the energy density of lithium ion cells, but because they're all about storing electrostatic charge as opposed to like chemical energy within like the shuttling of lithium ions and so on, they're able to dump that energy ridiculously quickly. They are effectively solid state. There's no moving components. It's not as if there's ions traversing between the electrodes. It's all about storing opposing charges on each side as opposed to opposingly charged ions, that sort of idea. And that, just the speed at which the power density they have is vast. And that means that you could recoup so much more energy under regenerative braking in racing applications, for example, which could then be either used to power the car again upon acceleration, or could be used to trickle charge or comparatively trickle charge a lithium ion battery, which otherwise would not have been able to take on that amount of energy so quickly.
Any more questions?
I see there's one in from the plug seeker. Where do we stand on hydrogen versus BEV for passenger cars? Well, to be honest, EVs are running away with the market at the moment. It doesn't help that there's not many hydrogen refueling stations, but when you just look at the vast efficiency improvement of an electric vehicle over a hydrogen vehicle, hydrogen is expensive to produce. It still needs to be shipped to the locations that it's required. I mean, that said, you can produce hydrogen on site. There are some fuel stations that are doing that, but it takes energy to produce that hydrogen. Even if you're using renewables, it still uses about 2.5 times as much energy to produce hydrogen for fuel cell vehicles as it does to just put that energy straight into a battery and run your car. So an EV will go a heck of a lot further on the same amount of electricity than a fuel cell car, having used that electricity to produce the hydrogen. On top of that, you can charge your car. Well, a lot of people can charge their car at home. And if you are out in the middle of nowhere, oh, thanks, Wilson. Sorry, Wilson's got to go. Yeah, if you are out in the middle of nowhere in a petrol or diesel car, you can take a jerry can to the nearest petrol station, which could be God knows anywhere. With an EV, chances are there's going to be a wee country cottage somewhere. You could ask very nicely to plug in for a little bit until you can limp to the nearest charge point. And chances are there's a lot more charge points than you might think. Mike pointed out there's now 5 rapid chargers on Skye. Skye, which has a population akin to a small town for the entire island. You know, the second largest town on Skye is something like 600 people. So yeah, 5 rapid chargers across all of Skye now, and then a whole bunch of Type 2 posts. So that gives you an idea of how easy it is to have an EV even out of the sticks. With hydrogen, well, you could take a jerry can to the nearest hydrogen refueling station, which is Aberdeen or London. And then, you know, you could pour the hydrogen in and then just watch it evaporate out of the jerry can and go, oh, sad face. So it's really, yeah, I would go EV every time. Hydrogen's expensive and it's an unnecessary middle step for passenger cars. I mean, hydrogen obviously has its uses elsewhere, particularly for long distance marine travel, for example. But yeah, for passenger cars, I mean, the fact that we're now up to the Model S is about to get an EPA rated range of about 400 miles per charge. The Hyundai Kona and the Kia e-Niro can do 270 miles easily. You know, it's why would you not? And I mean, even my little short range Nissan Leaf has been from Edinburgh to as far south as Leeds and as far north as Skye. And it's been an absolute pleasure to drive over that distance. Yeah, it's saved a ton of money and it's been solidly reliable. Any EV driver will tell you the same. It will be a long, long time before hydrogen can get anywhere near as close on cost grounds, and even then it will always be more expensive. Plug Seekers asked another question, why is Toyota still so bought into hydrogen? Probably because there's a senior exec in the boardroom at Toyota's headquarters who's, you know, too stubborn to admit that they were wrong. Either that or they're still stuck in the petrol head mentality. You get people who say, oh, no, I want a hydrogen car because it'll take 3 minutes to fill up. It's like, yeah, plus the 10, 15 minutes to drive to your nearest petrol or diesel station, another 10, 15 minutes waiting in the queue. And then if it's a hydrogen pump, it's probably frozen over as well. So you'll need to wait on it defrosting a bit. There was a really interesting thread about the real world experience of Californian fuel cell vehicle drivers. It's not fun.
They've also got to repressurize after they've fueled up. So
yeah.
after, if someone's just used a hydrogen pump, I think it takes 15 minutes to repressurize before the next car can then use it.
Yeah. I mean, okay, these are situations that can be improved, but it's going to take a while to do that. The one thing that I genuinely don't understand, but I think that sends alarm bells about the prospects of fuel cell vehicles, bearing in mind that hydrogen plays perfectly into the hands of big oil, because it means that you have a captive market that has to go to your petrol or diesel or hydrogen stations and use your fuel. They cannot, like EV drivers, charge at home. They don't have the option to charge anywhere there's a powered outlet. Why haven't these fossil fuel companies built hydrogen pumps at their forecourts using their own money? If it's going to be something that's going to sustain the status quo for them, if it's going to be something that, you know, if they build that infrastructure fast and get the fuel cell cars on the road and try and beat EVs, then, you know, people are going to be flocking to their service stations to get their hydrogen because no one's going to make hydrogen at home. Why have they not done that? Why are they still going cap in hand to the government saying, please, sir, can we have some more to build a puny little hydrogen demo station?
Yeah, I think the hydrogen stations are, it's about £1 million a pump.
Yep.
So yeah, that's really the bottom line of that.
Absolutely. I'm not going to pretend that a 350 kilowatt rapid charger is a bargain. It's not. I mean, the cost of a grid upgrade and a substation and so on for these sort of sites is vast. But if you look at a ChargePlace Scotland 50 kilowatt rapid charger, those are typically what, 20, 25K, something like that in comparison. Okay, 50 kilowatts is a bit old school now, but it'll do a lot of people handy.
But to be honest, the majority of people with batteries getting larger and larger and larger, the majority of people probably will never use a rapid charger and probably will only use slow chargers. I think when you did your trip to Norway, Euan, the amount of cars parked next to chargers but not charging, and chargers that were empty with electric cars just parked in normal bays because, well, they didn't need to charge.
Exactly, and that included short-range EVs. Yeah, we never had to queue for a rapid charger when we were there, but there were so many EVs on the road. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised at that. Again, it kind of helps if people have driveways and so on and can charge at home. That said, you don't need a driveway to charge at home, even if you've only got on-street parking. The UK Government Office for Low Emission Vehicles, OLEV, has an on-street residential charging grant. If you ask your local authority nicely, they should install a charge point outside your house using it.
Yeah, Tom that lives down here near me. I mean, he's had EVs for a number of years, and he was one of the first with the Model 3 down this neck of the woods. In combination with the local council and the county council, he had an on-street parking box put in with a parking bay because he lives, he's got no off-road parking. So there is opportunity out there for, to be able to do that. And you're not going to get a grant to put a hydrogen tank filling station on your curb in your sort of built up area. That's just not going to happen.
Something tells me it'll be against health and safety.
Yeah, definitely. I've just noticed we missed a question from earlier on in the web chat. Do you think, Euan, that the 600-mile quoted range for the Tesla Roadster 2 is going to be realistic by the time it's released?
Who knows? I think that's probably going to be based on the dry electrode coating technology, in which case it could well be. They're not going to be using cell-to-pack LFP for that. I very much doubt it. But yeah, if they do manage to perfect the dry electrode coating for mass production and prove in various tests that it's up to the challenge, then it could well be the range that you'd be looking at.
Yeah, apologies for not saying who asked that. I remember seeing the question, but now I can't find it. So apologies whoever asked that question.
Right. Well, we have been on for an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So, which was longer than the 45 minutes I originally anticipated. So
that reminds me of a certain show. That
it does. It's funny. I just want to say a massive thank you to Euan for joining us today. It's been really great having you on. Your knowledge is always incredibly valuable.
Well, thank you. That's been really enjoyable. And yeah, there were loads of great questions there. So yeah, apologies if we missed any.
We missed lots.
Oh no.
And talking about that, we're going to try and figure out a way to answer the remaining questions offline and post them somewhere. They'll probably be posted onto the Nexus Facebook page or somewhere similar.
Sounds good.
So thank you to all of the panelists. So Heather, John, Nick, obviously Euan and Charlie for hosting us on behalf of Octopus Electric Vehicles. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And yes.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie.
Bye.
Right. Okay. Before we go, we've got another one of these in about 2 weeks' time. I shall put an advert up about it, and we have got Robert Llewellyn.
What a coup.
Joining us.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. That's going to be great. So hope to see you all there, and get your questions ready. So
yeah,
thank
definitely.
you very much for your time.
Send the questions in advance, and then we know that we've got them.
Yes.
But yeah, I think you've done very well, Neil, for the first one, you and Charlie. I think it's gone swimmingly.
Thank you.
Oh, thank
See you guys.
Right. Speak to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that went well, Charlie.
Wait a second.
Gary Cambridge, I can hear you all.
You can hear. I can see you, Gary.
I'm going to be horrible and remove them all.
Oh, no.
Because what I'm worried about is if we end the meeting, we're
Mhm.
then not going to be able to get all the questions.
Questions.
Yeah. Good.
Oh,
good.
yeah.
So if I hit end and kick everybody, including you guys, out,
Yep.
what will happen is that all the questions will disappear.
Yep.
So I'm going to try and copy and paste them to somewhere.